Welcome to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Join the podcast mogul Phil Better as he interviews successful entrepreneurs that make their living in the digital world. Now, let's join your host, Phil Better, and his special guest today on Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I am, of course, your host with the most, Phil Better, and today we have a very special guest. Not only are they a digital entrepreneur, they are also the host of the Customers First podcast.
First Customers.
Partner at, pardon?
First Customers podcast.
First Customer. Okay, let's redo that.
Okay.
Welcome back to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I am, of course, your host with the most, Phil Better. And today I'm very excited to introduce you our guest. They are the host of the First Customer podcast, a partner at the 9. They are owner, investor in Trucking Labs, so many other things here. They are an incredible digital entrepreneur, and I'm just happy to have Paris Vega on the show today. Paris, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
So, Paris, I gave you a bit of an introduction. I would love for you to introduce yourself to my audience so they can get to hear who you are from your words.
Yeah, so I'm Paris Vega, and I'm a partner at the 9. Like Phil said, and I started out as the marketing director there, and they were a website design and development agency for about 15 years. And they hired me to start the marketing department. They had dabbled in it before, but they hadn't really taken it very seriously in the past. And so I joined their team as the marketing director, started the marketing department, defined the services we were going to offer, came up with our initial processes for every service that we offered. And it was lead gen, SEO, and I think maybe a little bit of social media management at first. And we started going on sales calls. Me and the CEO went on sales calls to some of their bigger website clients and started to convert them over to digital marketing clients. And that company's grown, I think, about double each year since I joined. A lot of that's come from the marketing side of things, because they had, a couple hundred clients and they just hadn't tapped into them to fully offer the marketing services. So tapping into their existing client base and then also going outside of that and taking advantage of, the big shift that happened 2020 when a lot of brick and mortars, especially on the e-commerce side, were like, hey, we should probably sell on the internet, and so any hesitation people had with doing business online was kind of removed. It's kind of one of the very few benefits of what happened during COVID and the pandemic. It kind of sped up the move to e-commerce and the value of all the digital marketing services out there. And so we were poised, perfectly. I think 3 months after I started is when the lockdown happened. And so we all went remote and had to do sales through Zoom, and managing the team remotely through Slack and Zoom and everything. But still, the company's managed to grow at a good pace for the past 3 years. And yeah, digital marketing is a large part of that. Especially now we're seeing a lot of growth on the SEO side. But that's taken up most of my time the past 3 years. And now we've grown the team. By no means was it all like me doing this at this company, because we had to, as part of building out this department, we had to hire lots of people, and every person that we added to the team, was a huge value add and taking over some aspect of the process that I had to learn to let go of. And I think that's always a hard thing that people struggle with whenever you're trying to scale, is realizing that you can't do everything, or even if you can do everything, you can't do it as well as a team of people who have specialists in different areas. It goes back to an old, who is it? Adam Smith, the old economist and famous person in whatever world history. He talked about the value of labor specialization, and how a small child who's trained in making nails, for example, is what he used in the book Wealth of Nations. But he said a small child trained in making nails every single day, and that's all they do every day for months, they can make more nails more effectively and faster than a grown man starting on his first day. And it's just a kind of an extreme example of labor
Mhm.
specialization and the benefits of having specialized skills and people who focus on certain areas and not having a team that's just full of generalists, even though there's an argument for that as well. But but there's a huge value in being able to allow your team to focus on a specific area that they can become really good at. So each team member can have at least some kind of a specialization, or at least be T-shaped,
Mhm.
where you understand a broad set of things, but have that at least one area of depth that you can add more value than anybody else in the company in at least one area. And so that's huge. The more that we've been able to kind of optimize in that direction and build out that team structure in a way that allows us to scale better. So that's a little bit of the inside baseball on growing that agency the past 3 years. But excuse me. Before that, I got a lot of experience in digital marketing through a project that I was kind of a partner in. I guess I was technically a contractor, but you mentioned trucking labs,
Mhm.
and I started trucking labs because I had years of experience in the truck driver recruiting industry.
Oh.
And while I was in college, I met a guy who became a lifelong mentor, and he had one of the first websites in the truck driver recruiting industry. So back in the day, a truck driver would go to either a employment agency or a trucking company and apply with a piece of paper, job application, just like any
Mhm.
field. Well, back in like 1999, this guy, Jim Davis, he started a website where a truck driver could apply online, and then they would send that application to all the trucking companies that were hiring somebody like that truck driver. And so he basically created this little niche industry, and being one of the first websites in that area grew and expanded. And I worked at that company during college as just like part-time. And it was my first, I think, digital marketing job. And I was like going around to different websites in the trucking industry, gathering email addresses so that somebody on the team could go back later and ask for links to point to their websites, just doing old school link building.
Yeah. And
And now,
old school data scraping as well.
right. Yeah.
Before AI came into the game and
Right.
saved you hours.
Yeah. It was just me part-time sitting at a computer in this guy's office, just looking for email addresses and putting them in a spreadsheet. That was basically the job, and just getting paid part-time hourly for that. But that was my very first exposure, I think, to digital marketing. And then through that job, got to learn a little bit of website design, and went to work there after college as my first full-time job as well, and got to learn more web design and website development, and really just got opened up to the internet marketing world way back in like 2002, I think, was the first part-time job I had at that company.
So since 2002, you've been in the world of the internet, digital marketing, either working for companies that use the
Yeah.
internet to make money, or starting your own companies, or helping scale companies in the internet world.
Yeah.
So the why that but what was it that made you want to stay in this world?
So when I was in college, I had this moment where I'd, like some people do who don't have much direction in life during college, you kind of bounce around to different majors. And I was definitely one of those people. I was starting out, I was like, I'm going to do business, or I'm going to do film or photography. I was just bouncing around to all kinds of different majors. And at one point I was doing like nonprofit music management or something. So I was just
That's a
going all
very
kinds of
interesting,
directions.
very, very niched,
Is
I must
it,
say. Nonprofit music management is supremely niched.
yeah, and that was like I think a specific course I was taking at the time, and because I grew up like being in bands and doing music and being involved with music at church and different forms of music and traveling around doing music in different ways. And so at one point I was like, well, maybe I'll do that kind of stuff. And it was horrible. Those
I love
classes
how
were so
the pause,
boring.
it was
Yeah.
just horrible. Like, trauma, PTSD is coming back, all that stuff.
Yeah. Uh, I'll still learn some valuable things though about nonprofits, but it was not what I wanted to do long term. But anyway, we were required to like go to a symphony and help, just like be the ushers or whatever at this orchestra thing. And so I was there, like looking out of a window or something, thinking, and this is 2000, probably 5, yeah, something like that, because I hadn't switched majors yet. And so I was still in college, 2005, and I was like, man, with this kind of work, you just kind of have to be in one place and do it. But I had this other part-time job where I was doing like some graphic design stuff because I'd grown up playing with Photoshop and things like that when Photoshop first came out, like Photoshop 2 before
The hard
Creative Suite
disk.
was a
Most people
thing.
don't remember that. The hard disk you
Right.
had to put
You had
in.
to buy a disc, yeah, like once a year, once every couple of years. And my friend like knew somebody who worked at the local newspaper who had a copy, and we would like stay up late at his house taking our friends' heads and putting them on each other's bodies and stuff. And anyway, that just got me into graphic design and volunteering, doing stuff at church and graphic design for like brochures or flyers and things. And so I had started to work at the university as a part-time, like a graphic design assistant while I was in school for all this other stuff. And I was sitting there thinking, man, if I was a graphic designer though, I could like travel the world, and just as long as I had an internet connection, I could just do that. Because yeah. And so I was just sitting there thinking that's way more like options, way more flexible. And so I just decided kind of in that moment, it's like, man, I'm going to change my major to like
Graphic
art or
design.
something, because that's how I'd done art in high school. And I'd kind of had basically through college trying to figure out, all right, which of my interests am I going to turn into a career, because I'd done a lot of different things, or just, I guess, a lot of the common things like you do music, art, sports. And if you're not good enough at sports, it becomes pretty clear you're just not going to make it. So it's like, well, that one gets ruled out pretty quick once you get to high school level, if you're going to do anything with that. Then it's like, okay, music and art, they linger around a little longer. You're like, hey, we can still get the band together. We can make it.
We'll be the next Metallica.
Yeah, we're going to release that single. And it's going to make a difference. But usually nobody ever cares because most bands never go anywhere. Just statistically. Now it's a whole new like world with all that. Now you can promote and anybody can make it a lot easier, but it also means there's a lot more noise. And so there's a lot more low quality stuff out there. But anyway, so yeah, filtering through the different interests to figure out what to major in, and finally decided on art like the last 2 years of school. And so I majored in digital media and with a minor in business administration. And yeah, that was basically the reasoning. Was it just seemed like way more flexible of a career. It lined up with some interests I had, just things that I did for fun anyway, and that I started doing freelancing, graphic design for some people throughout college, or especially my senior year in college. I started doing freelancing and convinced my professors to let me use my jobs as coursework. And so I was getting grades for things I was getting paid for. So that was awesome.
So
that
you already
hustle
knew the
started early.
secret. You knew the secret to being an efficient entrepreneur. Figure out how you can get paid to,
Yeah.
and oh my God, and stuff that you love. I love that. That's genius.
Yeah. Cause I was doing, they were trying to teach us how to do different things. And I was like, well, I got this client I'm doing this work for. Can this just count for what you're asking us to do? Cause it's literally It was basically the same kind of project. Yeah. And it's like, I'm already doing this. And I mean, it was still the whole digital version of, or the online version of graphic design and all these different fields were still they were relatively new back in the early 2000s,
Mhm.
I mean, web design and stuff had been around because, the 90s is really when it
Yeah,
exploded.
popped off.
Yeah. Then you had the 2001 crash, the bubble, the dot-com bubble. And so it made people a little more hesitant, I guess. But yeah, it was like the mobile revolution hadn't happened yet. Social media revolution hadn't really happened yet because Facebook came out, 2004. And I remember getting on Facebook in 2004, where that's when I joined it. And yeah, there was nobody had any idea of how huge all this would grow and just take over the world.
I want to kind of like talk about your journey. Like after you graduated from high school, college with your degree, where did you go to work? Like, did you find you got hired by the trucking company, right?
Well, first I just freelanced because I was already freelancing during college. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to keep doing this and grow my own graphic design business at the time. And then started to get people asking for like web design and hadn't really done that yet. I was doing more like logo design, business cards, advertising design. But I was game to try whatever. And so I was saying, well, yeah, I can do that. And, just trying it and making it happen as much as I could. But about 6 months or so in, after I graduated, one of my professors called and was like, hey, we got this teaching job at this like kind of like a technical college or something. And they had a position for like a design 101 teacher, and asked if I was interested in doing it. And I went and applied, and they hired me to teach for a quarter or a semester. I think they had quarters, I think is how their school worked. And so I taught that for a quarter and had to drive like, an hour one way to go teach. And it was like a once a week night class for like 3 hours or something. It was crazy. Or it was just something I didn't prefer. So they offered me the job after that first quarter to keep teaching, but I declined because I hated the schedule of having to travel. And I think it
It's
might
a
have been 2 nights a week.
5 hours for just one little thing, like hour there, 3 hours back. No.
Yeah. Yeah. It didn't sync up with my schedule. It just didn't feel, and really I felt like it was out of time. And what I mean is I felt like I needed to become a more experienced, like professional designer before I was in here. I was in there teaching people who were like grown adult professionals who were going back to school to learn this new skill. And so there were people like who could have been my parents, some of them, because I was right out of college. And my only experience was just freelancing, and I was telling them, yeah, you guys can make this amount of money on a design. And they were like, whoa, that's awesome. But it was weird because I felt so new and young. I was like, you know what? This is fun. Like I really enjoy the student teacher relationship and giving feedback and helping people, but it just felt like the wrong time in my life. Like I was like, I could see doing this maybe 20, 30, 40 years from now when I'm ready to be like, all right, I've accomplished, all the kind of business world things I want to accomplish. And now I want to kind of chill and go into professor mode or something. And so I declined that and went back to freelancing a little while, and then went to work at that trucking focused internet marketing agency after that.
I love that. And how did you get connected with the Nine?
So throughout my freelancing time, I did some work for them
Okay.
back in the day. And then we just got to know the owner and we became friends. And I think actually met him playing music. We played music at his church or something. And then he bought that company, the Nine, and we just kind of stayed in touch over the years doing work, here and there. And he'd offered me a job a couple times to come work with him, but it just never lined up. And so it's about 15 years later or so of kind of keeping that relationship open. After I left one of the several trucking related companies I've been a part of at this point, one of those trucking projects got sold, and I was moving on to something else and starting up a few of my own little projects, like trucking labs and something called Local Vibes. That was like a local business directory type website I was trying to get going for a little while, and started the podcast, First Customers Podcast, in 2019. And that 2019 was kind of like my year of experimenting and trying a few small bets, trying to get something going, scratching my own itches of different ideas I'd had for a while. Since I'd found myself at a place where I had some savings and I had room to experiment. And so I basically just took off work for a little while. Well, after that trucking project sold, I went and worked for a company called Dropified that a friend of mine owns, Chase Bowers. And they are a drop shipping software tool. It helps drop shipping store owners run their stores way more efficiently and saves them hours of time. And so I'd watched him build that and launch it, and it just exploded. And he was working with us on one of the trucking recruiting projects we were working on, handling the marketing side of things. And he actually introduced me to a lot of the kind of concepts and ideas of digital marketing, because up to then I'd been more of the design and web development product manager side of things. And so I'd spent from about 2006 until 2013. So about 7 years in the design, web development, product management side of things. Launched a website development design company in that time, the Web Craftsman, and worked at different agencies. But then when I met up with my friend Chase, and we had done some work together, freelancing, and with the Web Craftsman, he'd helped us out with some marketing things. I invited him to come work with us on this trucking project we were working on called American Driver Network. And he took over the marketing side, and me and my business partner at the time were working on the software and design and product management to get geared up and launched so that we could start growing that company with our mentor, Jim Davis. And so Chase started building out Dropified while we're working on this truck and recruiting stuff. And then one day he leans over and he's like, dude, look at this. And he shows me his phone, and it's like $200, whatever, $20, just like flowing, all the payment notifications. And I was like, wait a minute. Wait, what are you working on, man? Like, I knew he had been telling me little things, but we're in the middle of working on stuff. I'm half listening to him, as he's telling me he's building this side project. And then he's just showing me his payment notifications. I was like, dude, I missed out. I was like, how could I, is it too late? Let your boy in on a piece of this. But he was already in, it was already taken off at that point. And so he ended up leaving that project to go build that company, and it became Inc. 5000, fastest growing company. It was the fastest growing company in Alabama in 2019. And it was like number 55 on the list. So that took off. And so once American Driver Network sold, it got bought out by a company called Transforce. Once that company sold, got up with Chase and was like, hey, man, I'm looking for something else. And so I went and worked with him for a few months as a product manager at Dropified. And then I was like, man, I really just got to go out on my own for a little bit. I got time. I got a little money right now. I got to try to do some other stuff. And he understood, and we're still friends and everything. And so I left that company and spent the rest of 2019 experimenting, trying different things. And that is when I met back up with the owner of the 9. And we started working on some side projects together, and partnered up with him on this project called MyCast. And MyCast is the #1 fan casting site in the world. And what fan casting is when somebody, you watch a movie and you think, man, so and so would have been a better person for this role. And they go to mycast.io and they'll suggest who they want to see in a movie, or they'll create a different version of a movie and fill it all with the different characters and the actors they want to be in it, and then put it on MyCast, and all the people on MyCast can vote and rank who they think should be what. And it's just a way to spend time that I'd never heard about, but apparently millions of people do it.
So as a my first podcast was a movie podcast.
Okay.
And you talking about that, I'm like, that's genius. I want to tell all my friends about this, because they're all in the movie industry, in the movie world, and this would be a great place for them to, get their fans on the cast movies the way they want. Oh my God. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be visiting that site after this.
Yeah, it was just a side project of one of the developers, Billy Swift at the 9 agency. He was a user of a different site that did that, and then it got shut down. And so he was a developer, and he was like, well, I could build something like that. And so he built MyCast and posted it on Reddit. And it was just filling a gap, because he posted in the place where I guess him and others who use the other service would talk about their different ideas or whatever, their different casting suggestions. And it just took off. And he got thousands of users from Reddit, and just eventually put a little like Google AdSense on there to make some ad revenue. And so I joined that company, we turned it into a legit company because it was just a side project, but made it a official company, got a little investor. And I was heading up the marketing side of things. And so we just focused on that for a few months, about 3 or 4 months in 2019. And now it's, I don't even know the numbers right now, but it was in the like thousands of page views, and now it's in the millions of page views a month. It just keeps growing because it's got like this natural kind of SEO engine that happens where it's all user generated content basically.
Yeah.
So every time somebody has an idea for a different person in a different role in a different type of movie or whatever, they add that actor, and that creates a new page on the site that says, this person, like whatever, Brad Pitt as Batman in Batman 8000 or whatever. And so we're the only page on the internet with this random suggestion. And there's like a page for just about everything you can imagine now. Excuse me.
It's all right.
And so it's this cool little SEO lesson on that site where it's like this flywheel of content and rankings that happen because it's so many unique pages that aren't anywhere else, I guess, as part of it. And so we made a few little tweaks to how the pages are created, like how links get created and different things to try and improve the SEO. And it keeps growing, keeps gaining in the search engines. And so it's, making more ad revenue now. And we're trying to figure out how to better monetize that site. We did a partnership with a company called Legion M. I don't know if you've heard of that, but they do like crowd-sourced movies, sort of like they let the fans, like you can invest almost like a Kickstarter type situation, but you become a part owner of Legion M, and they've done a few movies with some pretty big actors now. And so they use MyCast to get like
ideas.
To crowdsource ideas for different roles.
I love that. Oh my God, that's genius. I love that symbiotic relationships that are coming from different businesses, different websites to come and help, because this just helps the fans, the customers, because they want to see their actors they're in the roles that they should be in. This gives them an opportunity to put it. And of course, movie companies can come see and say, well, you know what? We never thought of that. Let's try that. We can do something over here, retool it. My God, that's genius. That's genius. I want to talk about your podcast, First Customer, because it's a very, very unique concept as a podcast, because not a lot of people are doing a podcast where I'm going to let you explain it because I don't want to ruin the magic. Please explain what is first customer podcast. Sorry.
Yeah. So that 2019 year of experimentation for me made me face a lot of hard truths about myself, my own ideas and business and everything. Because just because you make something doesn't mean anybody cares that it's been made or is going to visit your website. It's not the Field of Dreams. It's not build it and they will come. Even though you might get that kind of advice or that kind of hustle advice, you just do it and it's going to work. And it's not. And a matter of fact, it's probably not going to work, whatever you're doing. That's terrible. But I'm just saying business is hard. It's definitely a lower barrier to entry than it's ever been in history now because of the internet. And, being a digital entrepreneur is like, I think one of the best and easiest ways to scale and grow and move from, one part of society up to the next level for sure. But it's still work. It still takes, a little strategy, a little thought, some luck, definitely hustle, and putting effort into it. But in 2019, I realized after working on all these different personal ideas that I had some gaps in knowledge and experience that I needed to fill because I didn't know how to get my first customers for all these different projects. I was sitting there and I had some ideas about how to do it, but even though I've done some sales over by that time for the different other projects I'd started or been a part of, I'd done a little bit of sales or from my own freelancing. It was just me freelancing. So I had to get the client and everything. It's part of the whole process. But as far as like launching a website and trying to get like eyeballs on it or launching a new service and, maybe the service doesn't apply to your personal network. So how do you get people outside of your network to, give you money for something? It's like walking up to a stranger on the street. How do you go from being a stranger to somebody they're handing money to? And so I realized there was this gap in my brain and my experience that I needed to figure out for the sake of any project I wanted to start in the future and everything I'd already started and every business I was involved in. I wanted to learn more about how other people got their first customers, because that moment is so important in the life of a business. Many businesses never even make it past that moment. They die before they've even finished making their version 1 or before they get that first customer. And I'd seen that in my own projects. So many things just die on the kind of the workbench where you're just coming up with ideas. You buy a domain name, you might start paying Shopify a few bucks a month, and then you turn it off a few months later because you never finished the process of whatever you were trying to do. And so decided to start a podcast and talk to the different business owners that I knew. I just figured I would start with people I knew or people who would respond to me and learn as much as I could about how they got their first customers and go really deep into those specific moments of going from nothing to something, from 0 to 1, and figured that I would learn enough eventually to become a better entrepreneur, better salesman, increase my odds of, being successful in business, become more wealthy, all those things. It just seemed like a good way to also build my personal network by meeting, new people eventually. And so that's what I started to do. I reached out to the guy I mentioned before, Chase Bowers. He was the first episode. And we went through the process of how he did it, what happened when he was building Dropified, and learned a lot. Even though I knew the guy, we were friends, we talked, but I didn't know all the details of exactly what happened until I went through it with him on the podcast and really just had an intentional conversation about that specific topic of first customers. And so that's what I've tried to do since then with each episode, is go into that moment even more than the person usually wants to and try to stay really focused, because there's a billion podcasts now, as you know. I mean, there's something about everything. But I think that a big mistake a lot of podcasts make is staying too general and not getting specific enough. And I think that that's helped me get guests that maybe I wouldn't have been able to get otherwise, if I'd been too broad. But since it's about something very specific, maybe it feels more understandable, more conceivable by the people I'm asking to come on the show. So it's been cool getting to talk to different CEOs of companies. And sometimes I feel like I have no business even talking to them, because
I know that feeling.
Yeah, they seem so more qualified. And so even though I'm only I think I'm about episode 25 is recorded, but 23 have been released so far. But it's been an awesome personal journey for me, getting to learn and meet these different CEOs and entrepreneurs, and just learn how other people have done it. How they've gone through that unknown kind of chaotic time in a business, and got their feet on the ground and got traction. It's like what that quote is about building a business. It's like jumping off a cliff and building a plane on the way down.
Most quoted quote on
Yeah.
this podcast is an entrepreneur's life is jumping off of a
Yeah.
cliff and building the plane on the way down.
Yeah, so it's good to hear a lot more stories. It's been good for me to hear how other people have gone through that, and the idea is that I want to find a pattern or some kind of this meta pattern, or what are the principles that seem to be consistent across all these stories, if there are any. And so that's what's starting to happen now that I'm 20 something episodes in. I'm starting to see those principles and starting to see, okay, here are the things that keep coming up that people have done that seem to be effective at getting those first customers.
I love that. And speaking of this, since you've talked to countless, we're up to 25, you said. So 25 successful entrepreneurs, business owners, CEOs, and that. And you come from a place of freelancing. And usually the steps into becoming a digital entrepreneur is like you move through freelancing as your side hustle, then it makes enough money that you can turn it into a business. What tip would you have for someone not necessarily right out of college, but is starting into the freelancing world to get their first client?
So the pattern that I've seen through talking to these different people on the show, and then my own experience, you greatly increase your chances of success if you make a connection with your target audience. Like the deeper connection you have with the people that you're trying to serve, the more likely it is that you're going to understand their problems that they need to solve. And so that means it's more likely that you can design a product or service that solves that problem. And since you're building that connection with them, those relationships of people in that target audience, you're more likely to be able to have a conversation with them about it. You can ask for feedback. Like I think it was episode 4 of the show. This Karen Schwanhauer, she just went to events and talked to people in the industry she was wanting to start a business in, and just ask them their feedback on her ideas for starting it. But she hadn't even started a business. And then somebody was like, yeah, that'd be great. And so that became her first customer, and they became like, she helped them grow into like $1 billion company or something crazy. And it just was from her asking for feedback from the people she was wanting to work with. And it turned into her first sale. And so that kind of thing where people are either leveraging the network they've built over years, or scratching their own itch in the sense so that they're part of the target market they're going after. That is kind of this one big point that I see that I'm trying to figure out how to apply more to my own projects and my own agency. But I think that's extremely important. Defining who it is you're wanting to work with, like your target audience, who is that? And if you're really early, you don't even know. You're just like, I just want to make money. Like, well, making money is the, exchange of value between you and another person, another group of people. And you're much more likely to be able to convince people to give you money if you have a very specific pitch, a very specific kind of value proposition that solves somebody's problem very specifically. And if you're saying, well, everybody's my client, everybody's my target customer, I can do lead gen for everybody, I could do SEO for everybody. It's like, you could, but the person who's hyper focused on, hey, I'm going to do, lead gen for real estate agents in this state, like they're probably going to have a better chance of outselling you than if you're like, I'm doing lead gen for everybody in the world. It's like, okay, well, what's that ad look like? Is it going to be lead gen for everybody in the world, or the guy who's like, lead gen for auto dealerships in, Chicago,
Cincinnati,
or Cincinnati, whatever? Like, that ad is probably going to speak more to that target audience in Cincinnati, those auto dealership, And so defining that target audience and then building not just ads that point at them and yell at them, but actually building relationships in the target audience you're wanting to serve. So going to events where your target audience is, not necessarily events about networking or selling, but events like where they would be, and connecting with them and figuring out, once you're laser focused on trying to get some specific new client, what are the things they're doing outside of business? Like actually building real relationships with people in your target market and picking their brain, getting their feedback, not just asking directly for money. That seems to be one of the secrets is that I'm seeing that kind of occurs consistently. And some people don't do it physically. They do it through online forums or communities like Reddit or Quora or whatever. And they'll be active participants in a community. Like this one company sells the little pads that go on the feet of RVs. Like whenever an RV parks and they put the feet down, they make these little rubber pads that go on the bottom of those metal feet, because apparently the manufacturing companies just leave them metal. And so they tear up the grass, concrete, whatever. So they just invented these little rubber pads. Well, they just were active in forums and got an understanding of what was needed because people complained about this, made a product, talked to the people in those forums, and they're, sold like $10 million worth of little RV feet.
My God.
So yeah, the better connection you have an understanding of your target market, the more likely you'll get those first customers. That's I think the leading pattern so far.
I want to touch on, because you've been pretty much you're an OG digital entrepreneur. You started freelancing way back when I had just graduated. Yeah. I want to know, what is a memory that you have that just like cements why you do what you do, like why you stayed in the world of digital entrepreneurship?
I think that the speed that you can see change was like a fundamental part of it that just gave me a little more joy than other forms of work I'd done before. Like, aside from just, working in a restaurant, working at Chick-fil-A or doing like tree work or construction or landscaping work, I'd done a lot of manual labor jobs before, throughout high school or college, helping my brother cut trees down and stuff and cut grass and all that. But then doing freelance work as a graphic designer, print designer, like print design is kind of a slower process where you don't even get to see your work until like it comes back from the printers and you just hope it's the right color. If you chose the right, cause digitally you see it and then you hope you pick the right color code and it matches what you thought it did, and never really did for me the way I thought it would. It always looked a little off. But then when I got that internet marketing job, that first like trucking related company, it was called eVision. But there was this kind of excitement that came with, oh shoot, you can like change something in the code and then bam, it's just instant. Like the changes I did are right there and you can put it live on the website immediately. And you just did it. boom, job done. Like you made an ad, put it on the website, and it's done. And so just that little speed kind of, it shortened the little the time it took to get your dopamine fix from like task completion. And so that was one aspect of it, of just being able to move a little faster was cool. And then in a bigger way, I've enjoyed how quickly you can change things, like in your own life, but also for a company. Like you can make some drastic changes and improvements much faster in the digital world. And like my mentor would say, he stayed in the digital world because you don't have to worry about inventory, depending on what you're doing. But he stayed on like the digital lead gen, recruiting, that side of things, because he's like, it's all digital. Like I don't have to hassle with products or, physical customer stuff. Like you can just move so much faster and grow so much bigger with digital assets. And I think that I'd stayed on the path just out of pure kind of hustle dreams at first of just, I'm going to do something, make it. I want my independence as well. And so I'd be in and out of different agency jobs or starting my own thing at different periods of my career. But just deep down, I always wanted to have more independence and be financially stable or prosperous or whatever, because I grew up poor and, single parent family in the ghetto. And so we all just wanted to grow up and be rich, whatever that meant, whatever it took to just get out of the layer of society that we were in. And so over time, it just seemed like it kept getting confirmed to me that this was the path. And I think a lot of it had to do probably with getting tied up to that mentor and watching him be successful and being like, whoa, dude's blazing the trail, like being successful in like family, his fitness, finances, his faith, like everything. He was just growing, past other people around me. And so I think that that's part of it. Like the people around me were influencing me to kind of stay in the digital side of things because of how scalable everything is. And then just watching how the world's changed over the past 20 years and watching, sometimes friends or different family in different industries struggling, and after I'd been heads down working and not really noticing how much the world's changing outside of what I was doing, and then kind of picking my head up and seeing the state of things and where others were at. And I was like, wow, if you're not in some kind of technology related field, like it's tough out there. Like, I mean, now I think there's a lot of opportunities because of the pandemic and the lockdown. I think that was another healthy mindset shift was, but there are essential workers that aren't in the tech industry, but that are very valuable. Like you still want your plumber coming to your house during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I think that rightfully so, truck drivers, plumbers, construction workers, all the frontline service workers and the people who kind of build the infrastructure of society are extremely important roles. And I think that there's, more respect needed for all the people who are on that show Dirty Jobs, where old Mike Rowe goes through and shows how hard these people are working. And there's also tons of blue collar millionaires out there that you wouldn't even expect. And so, digital world is definitely a place where you can scale fast and to much bigger levels. But it can also be gone instantly. So I had a recent project where I bought a website. I took out a loan on both of my cars to buy this website. About 3 months after I bought it, it went to zero traffic. All the revenue went away. And I was just sitting there paying the loan still. I'm still paying the loans.
Oh, that's painful. That's painful.
But it's part of this kind of process of always experimenting and trying new things. And I just stepped a little past my expertise, kind of like Warren Buffett would say, your circle of knowledge, I stepped a little bit outside of it. I was like, man, I've been in digital marketing forever. I've had SEO experience. I'm going to help grow this site. But I hadn't been specifically in the niche of like product review websites. I'd never worked on that kind of site really as a focus. And that's a whole other niche of SEO with its own issues. And that's what's happened over the years is Google has its own algorithms for every type of search result there is. You know, the intent is a factor, the type of, results that you're looking at. Like there's so many different factors now. And so when Google did like the product review update over this past summer, it just tanked. And so I was like, wow, always, no matter how long you've been in the game, there's always something new to learn. There's always another little niche with its own little set of specialties. So yeah, I'm still experimenting, still learning with little side projects, but others are going good though.
I love it. I love that. And we're coming to the final question of the show, the spark question of the show from Seek Discomfort. I want you to tell me about tell me about a goal that you've already turned into a reality.
A goal that I've already turned into a reality. Well, as a kid growing up poor, without a dad in the house, I wanted to have a family, and I have that now. Got a wife and 2 kids. And for me growing up, that was like one of my big goals because I didn't see that in my own life. And so that felt like one of the biggest gaps that needed to be filled, that I wanted to be what I didn't have. And I wanted to be the father that I never had to my kids. And so I definitely don't live up to what I wish I could be for them, or over the years, that's the other side of being a digital entrepreneur. Now we're getting into some of the, the realness of it is because it's digital, it's always on. Mm-hmm. You never have to stop working. You could always work. And so if you have any kind of addictive personality or obsessive personality, and I definitely have some of that, you can look down at your screen and pick up your head 20 years later and realize you got people around you that maybe you haven't invested enough time into. And so the whole world can pass you by. Like I felt a few years ago before I had time to kind of take a breath in 2019. That was like where I picked my head up and I was like, holy cow, I've been doing this for 15 years or whatever it was at the time. And I felt like it was just a warp speed where I looked down, graduated from college, looked down at my computer, picked it up in 2019, 10, 15 years later, and was like, okay, life just happened. It's just going to happen around you no matter what. So I'd say, I've had that goal of starting a family, and growing a business. That was always a dream. And so I've been a part of that now, and kind of getting out of, the kind of neighborhood I grew up in to a nice part of town, kind of, just leveled up in life was kind of the general goal that's happened. But I'd say as a word of caution for all the other digital entrepreneurs out there, life's passing every day, and the digital world never turns off. So you have to intentionally turn it off and engage with the physical world, or you're going to lift up your head one day and realize that your life happened anyway. It's like, it's not going to wait for you to hit your goals before time starts passing so that you can live the type of experience you want to have as this, much richer, wealthier version of yourself. It's like life's going to happen throughout that whole journey to you hitting your goal. So you need to make sure you live life along the way, and that you don't leave out of your daily experience and your life and the process and the journey. Don't leave out the people that mean the most to you in the end.
Amazing words to end the episode on. Jesus, I'm just enthralled. I'm just like, no wonder you're a podcaster. You have a great way of speaking and talking to people.
I appreciate that.
That's some amazing advice. Paris, I'm going to jump off the screen here. I want you to let my audience know where they can connect with you if they're interested in partnering with you at the 9, seeing if there's something your company can do, or where they can find the podcast, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people who are starting need to find out how to get their first first clients. So the floor, sir, is yours.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter, Paris Vega. So that's ParisVega. And that's usually where you can find me on other platforms. Instagram, I think it's Paris Vega Hyper. And then for the First Customers podcast, it's on all the podcast platforms. Just search First Customers, and it should come up in, top results there. But if not, you can go to my website, parisvega.com, and that's probably where you should go for everything, parisvega.com. Just my first and last name spelled. And I have obvious links to the podcast and everything I'm doing on there. And if you'd like to work with me through the 9 agency, again, you can go to my website and contact me through there. Or you can DM me on Twitter, and we can go from there. That's probably the easiest way. And, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, reach out through that. But I think that Twitter and my website are probably the best places to reach out. And at the 9 agency, we offer website design, development, and digital marketing. And digital marketing for us means SEO, lead gen, e-commerce, content marketing, social media marketing. And we help clients from all aspects of business. But, you got to have a certain amount of a budget for sure. But we just launched some new services for smaller businesses that started about $1,500 a month for targeted SEO plans that are more scaled down and focused plans for people who are just wanting to really focus on maybe one keyword to level up on, and a similar plan for lead gen and performance marketing services around $1,500, $2,000 a month for those. And those are kind of starter levels, but then we go all the way up to however much you want to spend, 10,000, 20 something thousand. And we work with clients that are Fortune 100 companies all the way down to local manufacturers of different products. And reach out, connect with me on Twitter, and see you guys on the internet.
Paris, thank you so much. Of course, to my audience, the links in the show notes will be all there so you can connect with him. Paris, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks, Phil.
To my audience, remember always to invest in yourself.